How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to episode 148 of the Leadway Wealth Builders podcast. My name is Chris Rickenbaugh, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about different ways to buy a house because there is definitely more than one way to buy a house. But if you haven't listened to this podcast before, my name is Chris Rickenbaugh, as I mentioned, and I am documenting my journey in real estate and business and also talking a little bit about travel hacking and personal finance. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at chris.rickenbaugh. That's Chris.Rechenbach. And if you're listening to this podcast, it doesn't grow without you liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast. So please like, share, and subscribe. And you can listen on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. So without further ado, let's hop into the topic today, which is there's more than one way to buy a house. So as we all know, say you've never invested in real estate before, and the only way you've ever bought a house is by going to a bank, getting a loan, and then purchasing the house. And then you do that a couple years later, and say you rent out your house, and you're just repeating that same thing. So I wanted to break down a couple of the different ways to be able to buy it, because whether you're in real estate or not, whether you're new or not, but this is going to be particularly for new people. So if you're just entering the game, there is more than one way. So I wanted to break out bank financing, cash offers, subject to, and seller finance. Let's just knock out some of the simple and easy ones. And then if you want to know more, shoot me an email, comment on my posts, and see what you want me to talk about. But let's go over bank financing first, since we pretty much all know what that is. So if you bought your own house, you've been through that mortgage process to where, you submit all of your information and more than you could ever want, probably twice, and then you can finally get a mortgage on your home. If you're doing it I would say the lowest amount possible, you're putting down 3% to 5% on a conventional or an FHA loan, and that way you can get into your house. And say you move out, there's more than one option. So if you're buying a rental property, normally what you're having to do is put down 20% if you're going through bank financing. Now there's a couple different ways for the DSCR, but Ian Smith on episode 147, he broke down what a DSCR loan is. So if you want to go back and listen to that one, I highly recommend it. It was a great interview with an actual mortgage loan officer, and he was able to give us the breakdown on the market, mortgages, and how somebody can start doing this for themselves. But bank financing, as buying rental properties, you're having to have the bank lend you the money, but you're coming down with a substantial, percentage down. So normally it's about 20%. I think sometimes you can get 10, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But I know 20% if you're just buying a normal property. So let's use this as an example of someone buying their own personal home. So they can let's do this on a $200,000 house. So a $200,000 house, let's say you have to put down 5%. So 5% of that is going to be, what is that? $20,000, $10,000. So if you put down the 3% on a conventional loan, it's going to be a little less than $10,000. So it's going to be right around in the ballpark of 6 to 8, probably close to 10 with all the closing costs, but you're only putting down about $10,000. So let's move over to if you were trying to buy that as a rental property to keep buying rentals. You're going to have to put 20% down on that rental property. And that's after you've owned a home for 2 years or been in business for 2 years. So that 20%, you're going to have to come out of pocket $40,000 to be able to buy that home. So if you really think about it, you're having to save $40,000 just to buy one rental property that's probably not cash flowing you more than $500. So the reason we say buy your own personal home, live in it for a year, and move and do the same thing, you're able in that let's just say it takes you 4 years to save up that $40,000, where you could already have 4 houses for that same amount that you would have put down, and you've lived in that home for 4 years. So you're able to, use that opportunity cost. And what is that time costing you versus the money you can be saving? So that's the tough thing with bank financing. But moving on to number 2 here, how you can buy a house. So a cash offer. So this is someone who either has a lot of cash or someone like me who's flipping properties. We're able to give a cash offer because we're able to close a little bit quicker. So I'll talk about on the flipping side, we're offering cash offers because we know we're able to close quickly. And for those sellers who want to close quickly and need that ease of closing, we're able to give them a cash offer. And it's probably a little bit lower or definitely lower than what they're looking for. But the reason we're offering a cash offer at our price is because it's easier for the seller because, they don't have to go through the hoops. They don't have to go through this 30-day thing and go through someone else getting prepared for a mortgage. It's just a quick, simple offer, and we know we can close on it. So a cash offer for someone buying a rental property that has their cash already, say, in a savings account, they don't really need to go through all of that, traditional bank financing. They're able to put up that $200,000 using the same example here. They're able to use that same $200,000, but just pay cash for it. So they don't need a bank. They're just going to pay you straight $200,000. So that with a cash offer, you're able to, negotiate to your terms a little bit more in your number just because of the ease of closing. So now if you're starting out and you're trying to buy your own home for the first time, I would go with the bank financing, the 3 to 5% down rather than a cash offer because you're more than likely not stacking up $200,000 in cash. So moving on to another way here. So as I mentioned, the bank financing, that's getting into your own personal home, doing the one rental a year or every 2 years. And then the cash offer is mostly used by flippers or somebody who's, stacked up a ton of cash and can just want a different way to store their money to grow wealth. So I want to talk about 2 other ways that you can get in lower cost, or if you're looking for that first home. So the first one is going to be subject to, and that's going to be taking over the payment. So if you're not familiar with subject to, that's Pace Morby's thing, and it's subject to the existing mortgage. So what you're doing is taking over the payments on that person's house. So say it's a $200,000 house. The person just bought it with a 3 to 5% down conventional loan. Say it's 3% just for this example. So they only put down, $6,000 to $8,000, and they have a mortgage for right around $190,000. So they have no equity in the home, and say they get relocated, they have to sell the home because they can't, take on another mortgage. It's not going to cash flow, and they just don't want the headache. So if they sold that home, they would have to come to the closing table with money, which they probably don't have since they only put down $6,000 to $8,000. So what you can do is you can offer this suggestion, and I don't know all the paperwork and details of it. I just understand the overall concept. I'm looking to bring on someone who does this normally for their own business, that they buy these properties. I think that would be really fun. But for this example, you're taking over, let's just say the payments are $1,200 a month. And that's how much they... So their mortgage is $1,200 a month, and all you have to do is say, hey, well, why don't I just take over that $1,200 payment, and then in a year after making that payment, it's able to come off your credit score showing that it's stabilized, and then they can go buy another property in a year. But another way to do that so that their credit frees up quickly and suddenly is putting you on a lease. So what you would do is also called a lease option. So they would put you on a lease for a year, and as soon as you show making the payments twice, whether that's a security deposit and first month's rent or 2 months rent, then it would come off their credit score showing that they're no longer financially, paying for that property. Now, I don't know all the legal terms, but that's the way it's done. We were really close to closing a deal a couple months ago about this, but to where I could have talked about it a little bit more, but that's the general scope to where, all they're really looking for is trying to recoup what they put in. Or so if somebody has a lot of equity, this is going to be a little bit different. You might have to ask them to seller finance their equity, which is what I'm going to talk about next. But for this subject to opportunity, say they put in $10,000. They have a $290,000 mortgage. They bought the house for $200,000, and all they're looking for is that $10,000 back. So on a subject to offer, what you could say is, hey, this $10,000 is going to go directly to you. You'll cover the closing costs so that they don't have to come out of pocket. So that way, that money that they put in, they're getting right back and can go buy another house, whether that's a lease option or a subject to opportunity. So, as I said, I don't know all the details on that. I'd like to get somebody on the podcast, and I have a guy that I can reach out to. So stay tuned for that. But the last one here I wanted to talk about is seller financing. So seller financing is basically the seller being the bank rather than having to go to the bank and get a loan. So we're going to stick with this $200,000 house example. Say the owner has the house and it's worth $200,000. They own it outright. No mortgage, no payments, no nothing. And you say, hey, I would like to buy your house on seller financing. So in an ideal world, you could say, I don't want to put down any money in the beginning, but I can give you, a payment up to, let's just say $1,500 a month. And that's all you would have to pay them. You could do no interest, 2%, 3%, anything you want. You can get as creative on the terms as possible, as long as it makes sense for the seller and you. You're able to negotiate those terms. You can put anything in that contract, even if you have to text them good morning every single morning for the rest of their lives. But that is seller finance, to where, you can create your own terms and you're working with the seller to figure out what they want to be able to hit their goals. So if all they're looking for, say they're looking for only $1,000 a month, you could say, well, instead of me thinking I'm going to have to pay $1,500, I could say, well, why don't I just pay you the $1,000 a month, and then for the 200 months, you're going to pay off that house. So I don't have the math right in front of me to figure out those numbers, but that's the possibilities with seller finance. And it's just working on them, listening to what their goals are and seeing how you guys can meet and help and work with each other. So seller financing, we're trying to do that I have one house on my list that I've been negotiating. So hopefully soon I can talk about that house. But as for this episode, that's all I got for you. I talked about cash offers, bank financing, subject to, lease options, and then seller financing. The only thing I didn't cover is seller financing with subject to. That's a little bit different, where I'm not going to get quite into that today, but as I said, that's all I got for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, you can follow me at chris.rickenbaugh on Instagram and TikTok to keep up with me on what I'm doing daily and what I'm learning. And you can also keep listening to this podcast wherever you're listening. Please like, share, and subscribe so that we can grow this and start helping other people, gain financial freedom, gain knowledge in real estate, and go towards their dreams. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.